It's a Sunday evening. Chris is 33. He's sitting at the kitchen island with his laptop open, a glass of water he hasn't touched, and a spreadsheet he told his wife he was almost done with 45 minutes ago. They make good money. Better money than their parents ever did at this age. They have a house, 2 car payments, a vacation they're still paying off from last March, a baby shower gift they put on a card in August, and a 401k Chris has touched exactly once since he set it up in 2019. He's not worried about money. Not exactly. It's something more specific than that. It's the feeling that everything looks fine from the outside and somehow nothing is actually fine. The numbers add up, the paycheck arrives, the accounts are positive, and he is still not getting ahead. Chris isn't in a crisis. Chris is in a trap. Actually, several of them. And the thing about financial traps in your 30s is they are specifically designed to feel like success while they're working. Let's start with the most invisible one. You got a raise. Maybe 2 or 3 of them. And your life just quietly expanded to meet every single dollar. There's a name for this. Lifestyle inflation. And economists have been studying it long enough to put an embarrassingly precise number on it. Research consistently finds that for every 10% increase in income, discretionary spending increases by about 8%. You get a $12,000 raise, you spend $10,400 of it. Not on one thing. Not on one decision. It just evaporates into a slightly better version of your existing life. A restaurant that's a little nicer. A vacation with a few more nights. A car where the payment is, manageable. A house at the top of your approved range instead of the middle. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances tracks this every 3 years, and the result is the same every cycle. Income and net worth diverge dramatically for people in their 30s. The people who end up wealthy at 55 didn't earn dramatically more in their 30s. They just let dramatically less of it leave. Here's the math that should make you put down whatever you're holding. If you get a $15,000 raise at 32 and invest half of it instead of spending all of it, at a 7% return, by age 62, that one decision is worth $170,000. Not because you did anything complicated, because you did nothing with half of it. The trap isn't that you're spending, it's that nobody tells you that spending is a decision, and not spending is also a decision, and only one of those decisions compounds. Chris got 3 raises between 29 and 33. He spent all of them. His lifestyle is genuinely nicer. His net worth is roughly the same as it was at 29, adjusted for the equity he's built in the house. He doesn't know that yet. He's about to find out in a very uncomfortable way, which I'll come back to. Speaking of the house, the bank looked at Chris's income, ran its calculation, and told him he was approved for $620,000. Chris bought at $589,000 because he felt responsible for coming in under the number. And that is exactly where the trap snaps shut. What the bank's approval doesn't account for, property taxes, homeowners insurance, PMI, HO fees, maintenance, repairs, appliance replacement, landscaping, utilities that are suddenly 3 times what his apartment cost. The 28% rule, your mortgage shouldn't exceed 28% of your gross income, exists for a reason. Most first-time buyers in their 30s are at 35 to 42%. Here's the number that lands differently. The National Association of Realtors found that in 2024, the median first-time homebuyer was spending 38% of their gross income on housing costs, all in. Nearly $4 in $10 before taxes, before food, before the car, before anything. And unlike a renter who has flexibility, Chris is locked in. If the job changes, if the income dips, if someone gets sick, he cannot make the house cheaper. He can only make everything else cheaper. The house is permanent. Life is not. But here's the trap inside the trap. The one that almost nobody is talking about publicly. Chris bought his house in 2021. His mortgage rate is 3.1%. That sounds like a win. It is a win. It is also a very comfortable cage. If he wants to move for a better job opportunity in another city, he has to give up that 3.1% mortgage and pick up a 6.8% one on a house that now costs significantly more. Economists call this the lock-in effect. Estimates suggest it's holding roughly 1.5 million housing transactions hostage every year. People who would move, who should move, who are staying in houses that no longer fit their lives because the financial penalty for leaving is catastrophic. Chris is one of them. He just doesn't think of it that way yet. He thinks of it as his home. Okay, here is the one that makes me the angriest on behalf of every 30-something who set up their 401k on their first week at a new job and thought they were done. Most employer 401k plans have a default contribution rate. That default is usually between 3 and 6%. Most people never change it. They set it up during onboarding while also choosing their health plan, getting their badge photo taken, signing 14 forms, and honestly just trying to figure out where the bathroom was. And then they move on with their life and never open the account again. Vanguard's How America Saves report, which tracks tens of millions of accounts, found that the median employee contribution rate sits at about 7.4%, barely better than the default. And the median 401k balance for people aged 35 to 44 is $35,537. For context, if you plan to retire at 65 with a modest $60,000 a year to live on, you need roughly $1.5 million saved, using the standard 4% withdrawal rule. To get from $35,000 at 35 to $1.5 million at 65 at a 7% return, you'd need to contribute about $1,600 a month. That's roughly $19,200 a year. The IRS contribution limit for 2026 is $23,500. So you need to be maxing out, or nearly maxing out, every single year for 30 years just to hit the minimum comfortable retirement number. The median person is contributing $4,000 to $5,000 a year and calling it saving for retirement. That is not saving for retirement. That is postponing a very difficult conversation by 30 years. Here's what nobody told Chris during onboarding. The employer match is not your retirement plan. It is the floor. And you are building your financial future on a floor. The fix is so simple, it's almost insulting. Increase your contribution by 1% every time you get a raise. 1%. You won't feel it because the raise absorbs it. You won't miss it because you never see it. And compounded over 25 years, the difference between contributing 7% and 12% is not 5% more money. It is the difference between a retirement and a problem. This one disguises itself as wisdom. You are 33. You have been told, correctly, that you have time. Time is your greatest asset. Compound interest works in your favor. You will hear this from parents, from podcasts, from articles with stock photos of people sitting in hammocks. All of it is true. And it is the most expensive sentence in your financial life if you let it become a reason not to act today. Here's what I still have time actually costs. If you invest $500 a month starting at 30 at a 7% return, you have $1.2 million at 65. If you wait until 40 to start the exact same $500 a month, you have $606,000. You didn't save less per month. You put in the same contribution. You just started 10 years later. The cost of that decade of comfortable confidence was $594,000. Think of it as the time confidence tax. You're paying it right now, invisibly, every month you wait. And here's the specific cruelty of this trap in your 30s. You probably tell yourself you'll get serious in your 40s. When the kids are older, when the mortgage is lower, when life settles down. I've covered what your 40s look like financially in another video, and I will just tell you this. The 40-something standing in their kitchen at 6 a.m. trying to figure out if they're behind, they thought the same thing at 33. The 30s are the decade where the window is still wide open and you're standing just outside it telling yourself you'll climb through later. The math doesn't care about later. It cares about now. Let me tell you about the most expensive decade of peer pressure in your entire life. And it is not high school. Your 30s are when everyone around you is getting married, buying houses, having children, taking international trips, driving cars that cost more than your first apartment. The social expectation is quiet. But it is constant and relentless. You attend the bachelorette weekend in Nashville. You contribute to the group vacation fund. You buy the dress for the wedding because you're in the wedding party. You show up to the gender reveal with a gift. You get the dinner for the couple who just bought the house. The American Express spending survey found that 34% of millennials went into debt for a friend's wedding-related event. Not their own wedding. A friend's event. The average bridesmaid or groomsman spends $1,800 per wedding they're in. And 62% of millennials admit they've spent money they didn't have to avoid appearing like they had less than their social circle. This is not a personal failure. This is the most sophisticated social pressure system humans have ever built, running on reciprocity, on belonging, on the fear of being the person at the dinner table who orders the cheapest thing and makes everyone vaguely uncomfortable. You cannot willpower your way out of it. You have to name it. The comparison debt trap. Chris spent $4,400 last year on social obligations he couldn't comfortably afford. He put most of it on a card at 22% interest. He's paying it down at $200 a month. He'll clear it in about 18 months. And by then there will be more. There is always more. Here's the thing. The people I've studied who actually built real wealth in their 30s, without inheritances, without windfalls, without a crypto lottery ticket, all of them have some version of the same sentence they deliver calmly when a social obligation doesn't fit the plan. I can't make it. 2 words. The hardest sentence a 30-something can say out loud, and the single most financially protective habit they can build. I'll come back to the spreadsheet on Chris's kitchen island in a few minutes. First, let me show you the trap that's been running the longest without anyone seeing it. Take out your phone right now. Seriously, take it out. Open your savings account and look at the balance. Now answer this. If you lost your job tomorrow, how many months could you actually survive on that number? Not your 401k, not your home equity, not your credit limit, just that number, divided by your monthly expenses. What's the real answer? Most people in their 30s say 2 or 3 months. The actual answer is typically closer to 3 weeks when you do honest math. Because the number in savings is simultaneously the emergency fund, the vacation fund, the car repair fund, the holiday fund, and the we'll figure it out fund for everything else life throws. It's one account doing 7 jobs with money for maybe one of them. The Federal Reserve's report on the economic well-being of U.S. households found that 63% of Americans say they could cover a $400 emergency with savings. But when researchers dig deeper, roughly a third of those people plan to use a credit card they expect to pay off, which is not savings. That is a loan wearing a savings costume. A genuine 3 to 6 month emergency fund, fully liquid, in a high-yield savings account, strictly quarantined from every other spending intention, is genuinely rare. Bankrate puts it at around 44% of Americans. For people specifically in their 30s, it's lower. Because the 30s are the decade of maximum financial surface area, mortgage, kids, cars, aging parents beginning to need things, and minimum cash cushion. Here's why this matters beyond the obvious. An underfunded emergency fund makes every financial decision slightly more desperate than it needs to be. The car breaks down, and you put it on a card because you don't have cash. The card balance grows. The interest compounds. And now you're paying 22% a year on a problem that 3 months of savings would have made completely invisible. This is how people with solid incomes end up in credit card debt they genuinely cannot explain. Not one catastrophe. 100 small ones, each handled with a card instead of cash because the emergency fund was technically there but functionally empty. Chris has $4,200 in savings and $5,800 in credit card debt. He thinks of himself as a saver. Technically, on paper, he is a net borrower. This one is elegant in how completely and quietly it destroys wealth over time. The average new car payment in America as of 2025 is $737 a month. The average loan term is 69 months. A lot of people in their 30s are on their second or third financed vehicle since turning 25. What nobody told them is that a car is the only major asset specifically engineered to lose value the moment you sign the paperwork. A new car drops roughly 20% in year 1. Another 15% by year 3. You are financing depreciation and calling it transportation. But here is the trap inside the trap. Around year 4, something happens. The car works fine, the payment is almost finished, and the manufacturer starts marketing the new model. The dealer calls. Your loan is almost done. Would you like to trade in and keep the same payment? And because most people track the monthly payment and not the total cost, they say yes. Every time you do this, you extend your car payment permanently. You never own outright. You always have a payment. It is leasing without the honesty of calling it leasing. Do the math with me. $737 a month invested at 7% return from age 30 to 65 is $1.37 million. Not a small number. That is a complete retirement. For most people in their 30s, it is instead a car, and then another car, and then another car, and at 55, they have a very nice vehicle and a very thin 401k, and genuinely no idea how that happened. Chris drives a 2023 truck he bought in 2022. He traded in a 2020 truck to get it. He kept the payment roughly the same. He is planning to trade it again in about 2 years when a lease deal makes sense. He describes this as being smart about cars. Here is the trap that almost nobody in their 30s walks into voluntarily. Because it requires thinking about something genuinely unpleasant. The most valuable financial asset you own right now is not your house, not your 401k, not your car. It is your ability to earn income. If you're 33 and you make $90,000 a year, your remaining career earnings assuming steady income in retirement at 65 total over $2.8 million. That is a $2. 8 million assets sitting inside your body, showing up to work every morning, depending entirely on you staying healthy enough to use it. Disability insurance protects that asset. If you become unable to work, whether from illness, injury, or accident, long-term disability coverage replaces 60 to 70% of your income. The Social Security Administration estimates that 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds will experience a disabling condition before they retire. This is not a rare edge case. Yet the Council for Disability Awareness reports that only about 30% of private sector workers have any long-term disability coverage. And most of those people have a group employer policy that covers maybe 50 to 60% of their salary, often taxable, which after taxes means 35 to 40 cents on the dollar of your current income if something goes wrong. That is the trap. Not ignorance of disability insurance. Misplaced confidence in what you actually have. This one requires a specific action, and I want you to do it this week. Call your HR department and ask 2 questions. 1. What disability coverage do I actually have? 2. Is the benefit taxable? Write down exactly what they tell you. Not what you think you have, what you actually have. Life insurance is the same conversation, and it's even simpler. If anyone depends on your income, a spouse, a child, a parent, you need term life insurance. You're 33. A $1 million 30-year term policy costs somewhere between $25 and $40 a month if you're healthy. The price is set at the moment you buy it, based on your current age and health. Every year you wait, it costs more and covers fewer years of your earning runway. Chris has the employer policy and nothing else. He has thought about getting term life coverage several times. Something always comes up before he finishes the application. His family's financial plan depends entirely on his continued ability to show up to work and has no backup mechanism. That is not a plan. That is optimism with a mortgage attached. This is the modern one, the 21st century version of the slow leak. Take out your phone. Go to your bank or credit card statements for the last 90 days. Filter for any charge under $50 that repeats monthly. Count them. The average American household is paying for 4.5 streaming subscriptions. That alone runs $60 to $90 a month. Add the gym membership used irregularly, the meal kit paused and then forgotten, the cloud storage upgrade, the news apps, the password manager, the productivity app from a January resolution, the software subscription needed once for a project 3 years ago and never canceled. The small ones. The invisible ones, specifically priced to sit below the threshold where you feel the decision. The personal finance platform Rocket Money analyzed over 1 million accounts and found that the average American spends $219 a month on subscriptions and underestimates that number by 79%. Meaning, when asked, most people guess around $86. The actual number across their accounts is $219. They were wrong by more than half on something they pay for every single month. $219 a month invested at 7% from age 32 to 65 is $286,000. That won't retire you alone. But it is a meaningful chunk of a retirement that most people are instead spending on services they cannot immediately name when asked to list them. The trap is not the cost. It's the invisibility. These subscriptions were specifically, deliberately engineered to be frictionless to sign up for and tedious to cancel. That is the product design. The confusion is intentional. The 1-hour fix, export 3 months of statements, sort by vendor, cancel everything you haven't used in 45 days. Chris did this exercise 8 months ago and found $187 a month he couldn't account for. He canceled 6 things. He re-upped 2 of them within 90 days because the apps kept sending him re-engagement deals. The convenience is the trap. You have to name it every single time to win. And this last one is the hardest to see because it lives entirely inside your head. Your 30s are the decade when your salary becomes your identity. You hit a number that felt genuinely impossible when you were 24. And it starts to define how you see yourself, how you see your future, how you make financial decisions. And the trap is exactly this. Income is not wealth. A high income is a tool that can build wealth. It is not wealth itself. Thomas Stanley spent decades studying actual millionaires for The Millionaire Next Door and found almost no correlation between income and net worth above a certain basic threshold. The highest earning professionals, doctors, lawyers, senior corporate executives routinely had lower net worths than plumbers, farmers, and school teachers of the same age who had spent 30 years quietly not spending what they made. Read that again. People earning $400,000 a year consistently outweighed in net worth by people earning $80,000 a year, because one group spent to match their income and one group didn't. In your 30s, your income is probably the highest it's ever been. And the impulse is to live like it. To let the number justify the car, the house at the top of the approval range, the vacation that goes on the card. But wealth is built in the gap between what you make and what you spend. And for high earners in their 30s, that gap is often exactly zero. Chris makes $118,000 a year. He has a negative monthly cash flow of about $200 after all expenses. He is technically spending more than he makes, carried by a credit card balance that grows slightly every month. He doesn't feel broke. He feels like a person who earns $118,000 a year. That feeling is the trap. The question is not, what do you make? The question is, what are you keeping? Let me show you what Chris's full picture looks like on that Sunday night spreadsheet. $4,200 in savings, $5,800 in credit card debt, A 401k at 5% contribution he set up in 2019 and hasn't touched. A mortgage at the top of what made sense. 2 car payments totaling $1,490 a month. $219 a month in subscriptions he can't fully account for. No disability insurance beyond the group policy. No term life insurance. No will. Net worth that's essentially flat compared to 3 years ago despite 2 raises, and an income that most Americans would consider substantial. Chris is not irresponsible. Chris is not bad with money. Chris is the median 33-year-old doing everything he was told to do. Get a good job, buy a house, contribute to the 401k, don't be reckless, and quietly losing ground inside a system designed to take money from him in ways that feel like decisions he freely made. The traps in your 30s don't work by taking big bites. They work by taking very small ones, consistently, over about 15 years, until you look up at 48 and wonder where the decade went financially. And the answer is that it went the same place it always goes. Not to one disaster. To 1,000 comfortable, justifiable, socially encouraged decisions that each made complete sense in the moment. But here's what I need you to hear before we get to the fix. This is not the part where I tell you you're cooked. Here's what you do this week. Not this year. This week. Open a blank document and write down 5 numbers. Your monthly take-home pay, your monthly fixed expenses, every single one including subscriptions, your current savings rate as a percentage of take-home, your liquid savings in months of expenses, and your current 401k contribution percentage. 5 numbers. That's the full picture. If your savings rate is under 15%, that is the first trap still working on you. If your liquid savings covers less than 3 months of expenses, that's the second. If your 401k is below 10%, that's the third. And if you don't have term life and disability coverage you can articulate specifically, that's 2 more. You don't fix all 5 at once. You don't have to. Pick the one doing the most damage and move it by 1 unit, 1% more to the 401k, captured from the next raise. 1 extra $200 a month redirected from subscriptions to an emergency fund. 1 I can't make it this month to a social obligation that doesn't fit. 1 call to HR about your actual disability coverage. Here's the math that should make this feel worth it. Chris at 33 decides to increase his 401k contribution from 5 to 10%. That's roughly $490 more a month going in before tax. At a 7% return over 32 years, that one decision made on a Sunday night while everyone else is asleep is worth approximately $640,000 at retirement. Not because he did anything complicated, because he turned on a machine and left it running. The traps in your 30s don't require genius to escape. They require specificity. The people who look back at their 30s and feel good about their financial foundation didn't have better incomes or better opportunities. They had better numbers. They knew exactly what was coming in, what was going out, and they made one small, uncomfortable decision per quarter to widen the gap between those two things. Chris closes the laptop at 10:47 p.m. His wife has already gone to bed. The glass of water is still untouched. He didn't solve everything tonight. He found out things he didn't want to know, which is different from solving them and also, critically, the first step. Tomorrow morning, he's going to call HR about his actual disability coverage. Tuesday, he's going to pull 3 months of statements and do the subscription audit. And sometime this week, before the feeling fades, he's going to log into his 401k and move the slider from 5% to 8%. Not to max, to 8. One real step. That is not a finance guru plan. That is just the first trap getting disarmed. If you looked at your 5 numbers tonight and felt a version of what Chris felt on that Sunday evening, that tightening in the chest that's somewhere between dread and clarity, that is not a bad feeling. That is the correct feeling. That is the feeling of seeing the trap before it finishes closing. The 30s are not the decade you got it all wrong. They are the decade you still have enough time to get it right. The window is open. Most people just don't look at it until their 40s, and by then, it's half the size. You're looking at it now. Write down the 5 numbers. Pick the first trap. Spring it.